off of a weekly undulating triphasic model where we have an eccentric, an isometric, and a concentric day. So we're expecting to see X, Y, and Z based on where they're at in that, whether we're doing super maximal contrasts or we're doing extensive eccentrics. We're looking at, okay, how is this affecting your jump data at the end of the week? And so when you come in for an eccentric, an iso, and a concentric day, it's cool to see how there are 8 bread and butter KPIs go here, come down, and then they rise up in that day 3. So we're seeing that realization start to occur for both braking and propulsive. So that's how it helps with the
and you're seeing that realization within a week.
You're just seeing like very small, right? So we're looking at
small subtle changes.
So we're looking at like against their Z score. So when we compare to themselves,
sorry, let me pause you real quick. So when it comes to the Z score, how long does it take to baseline them?
So we're getting now accumulating 3 tests every day before they get into their session. So the more data points that we have, the better. But what we've seen across the board, let's say with this super maximal phase I've had a couple of our athletes with, we look at when they come in for their eccentric day, we're seeing them compared against themselves. We've had it for 3 weeks. So them compared against themselves in 3 weeks of time over all of those days. So we're looking at braking rate of force development, braking net impulse, average relative propulsive force, propulsive net impulse, RSI in the counter movement jump. And that's it. Yeah, those are our bread and butter.
My only thing is, what's the reliability, right, on the braking rate of force development? Because I know I've played around with like rate of force development on the force plates, and it's like it's wonky. It's like all over the place. I'm talking like variability, like through the roof.
Yeah, concentric. I don't pay any attention to concentric rate of force development because I do think that definitely is a fluffy metric, if you will. But braking RFD, I haven't seen even between reps, just personally, off of all the tests that we've done now. We've tested over 100 athletes now over the last 3 weeks and at least twice a week. I don't see as many massive changes in the braking metrics when it comes to RFD, but I haven't looked at the variability of the concentric. Even right off the bat, when I started using them, I knew that there was going to be a tremendous amount of variability. I know that Vicky Bendis has, she's kind of seen that as well through her work with Brock and Hockey Canada, and same with Dr. Jason Lake. So I've looked at the braking RFD. I don't see a tremendous amount of variation from day to day. It's more stable, if you will. And even between reps, we don't see a ton. So I standardize their jumps on the force plates. So how I cue the jump is, for the force plate specifically, is come down fast. I want you to go down into your jump fast and come out for a few reasons, because I want to see how that affects their stiffness over time, the stiffness metric, or the RSI. And secondly, when they are fatigued, we're going to typically see that eccentric phase duration is going to be a little bit longer. And so if they know to learn the skill set of creating good jump outputs through a faster descent, and we're building that, then when they are tired, we're going to see, because there is the metric there right on in real time, it'll show you how long they're spending in the braking phase, and what percentage of the entire jump they're in that phase. So when we cue everyone to do the same strategy of jump right off the bat, we can then see a little bit more sensitivities when it comes to the eccentric work, especially when they're fatigued. So our hockey players, for example, when they came in on a Monday morning, or when they came in on Wednesday after a practice, we were actually able to see longer eccentric durations because it was maybe an hour after their practice that night. So that's going to take a little bit more work, a couple more weeks, months, etc., to see, okay, every Wednesday though, are we seeing stability across the board in those braking metrics? But right now it's interesting. I'm not changing plans based off of what I'm seeing in the braking domain. I'm seeing, okay, this is cool. 5 athletes in this phase are all getting similar changes across the week in those 6 metrics that we're addressing. And they're all across the board. We're seeing braking RFD go up, braking net impulse go up, propulsive goes down, stiffness goes down in the day two because it's after their eccentric day. We're seeing the same kind of trends, but then again, it's all taken with a grain of salt because I want to see if this is the same if I had 30 athletes on this exact model and seeing how they would all respond and what that variance is between them.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting because now where my head's going is I see with your youth population, you're teaching them to come down faster, right? So it'd be interesting to find out at what point does the skill of learning to come down, like to, again, increase your eccentric rate of force development, right? Does that diminish? And then you actually have to train the physical qualities to then increase that skill. But I'm assuming now with your older population, they have the skill pretty quickly. Now it's like you have to do now and change the physical structures. Does that sound
Yes.
right? Or is...
Yeah. So what we do now is, let's say, okay, we had one of our baseball pitchers in for a couple of weeks. He has a pretty high level of relative strength when he came back from school over the Christmas break. So we went in with super maximal eccentric day, French contrast. And I kind of posted about that before. We did a super maximal eccentric day, super maximal isometric day. We started at 100%, which is about of their split squat, which is about 82.5% of their back squat. So I went off of that Cal Dietz model, did a triphasic, like a French contrast exact scheme for that. And then I retested jumps after each set for when they were with me to assess the post-intervention changes and determine whether or not they would continue. And we use an effort index. So if their reps of the split squat dropped below 90%, so we did a 10% effort index after the super maximal iso or eccentric, that would cut off the amount of reps they did in the set. So we were able to manage fatigue as best as possible. And again, monitor their volume based on one, the effort index. So they had a ceiling amount of reps of split squats to perform that session. And then how many sets they would do would be determined off of that effort index. And then we would continue to say, hey, we're testing your jumps in between sets to see if you're dropping, if your eccentric phase is increasing, or if your RSI is decreasing. That would be our priority. So we did that. And again, what we were able to see from that was tremendous. He had the strength. So this is someone who has great relative strength. And now we were able to then take that peak week right before he went this week and do a lot of propulsive work, take out most of the supermax work, and just keep him as stiff as possible, work on his front leg and his back foot work specifically. And it was great. He loved this phase. He said this was the strongest he's ever felt. And he was able to split squat 355, things that he's never been able to accomplish before from doing this because he already had the skills. Now, with any of our other elite level athletes that don't have good relative strength, we're not going to opt for that because they still have to learn physically. We still have to build that eccentric, isometric, and concentric strength more extensively than someone like himself.
That's really cool, man. Honestly, that's really good. I'm gonna post about these things. I'll get these videos from you after too.
Yeah.
So we've talked a lot extensively about the eccentric phase. So selfishly for me, I'm really admire all the ISO work that you've done, and I know you've been doing this for I don't know, I think maybe 2+ years that I can think of.
Yeah.
Like going back to when you were at Seneca, you had like your extended isometric warm up. So can you kind of just go into that and then just talk about just kind of the benefits that you've seen from using these and implementing them?
Absolutely. So I've gone all across the board when it comes to isometrics with, learning first from Jake Tour. I give all the credit to him and Dr. Tommy John on the super extensive isometrics, the 5-minute extreme isos. I never got into the 5-minute realm, but what I can take away of using this for over 2 years, started with Seneca, was just that general understanding of tendon health versus tendon performance. And creating more balance between. And I never really, before that, I never really thought about influencing the tendon. I just thought, okay, I was running mostly off of conjugate schemes, dynamic effort, max effort, you know, work off of that and just continue to see improvements. But as soon as we started implementing those tendon health exercises, adding specific, you know, isometric work, extensive isometrics to failure, I started to see tremendous changes. And it first started with eccentric utilization ratio changes for people with isometric work that we were able to do higher volumes with. And then it looked into, okay, well, how does this transition if we go into high velocity eccentrics into isometric? So drop catches with load, you know, squatting, rapid pauses, etc. And it was always favorable. We saw less knee pain, less back pain, less hip pain. People were getting healthier and feeling better, including myself. And so I started with implementing a high five ISO in the warm up, where we would do 2 minutes accumulated. So we'd start off with 30-second isometrics for isometric lunge hold, isometric hip flexor, hamstring, groin, and push up. And we would do 4 by 30 seconds. And every day, the athletes always knew right after the warm up, we were going to do this high five ISO, and you would incrementally increase the loads until we got to, you know, hey, I can do 100 pounds on my back, or I can do my entire body weight on an ISO lunge. And again,
sorry to cut you off.
Yeah, no worries.
I'm selfish. I'm just writing these things down. So
Yeah,
you said you do the lunge?
Yeah, we do lunge, hip flexor, hamstring, like a hamstring bridge, groin plank, either on the floor or on the bench, and just a push up.
Is that like a Copenhagen?
Yeah, Copenhagen. Yep.
Okay. And then what do you say what the fifth one was?
Push up ISO.
Ooh, that's gotta hurt.
And so we'd add that. Sometimes we would omit the hip flexor and put in a dead hang with a knee raise, and he would hold that for 30 seconds. And it just became a staple for the kids when I started ASP that before my lift, I do my high five ISOs, and every day I get stronger. So even the kids that were training on consecutive days, they weren't getting sore. They were feeling better the day after, despite holding half their body weight in each hand and doing a lunge ISO for 30 seconds. So I started to become really heavily influenced by the impact of these isometrics, because I was seeing these kids with less than a year of training age getting tremendous results really fast in when they got into their squats, when they got into their jumps. You know, we were getting kids that were flying through their progress in their jumping ability. And, you know, you would almost think otherwise because they're doing high load isometrics. And this shouldn't really improve their spring unless we did some more dynamic work in the session. So that's where I led that and started to see great results with it. And then I moved forward into like isodynamic pre-fatigue and post-fatigue. So it became less a part of the warm-up, and it became now a staple. So anybody that starts off in our programs, they get on a 2 to 3 week pre-fatigue isometric where they'll do their jumps, their throws, their sprints, everything ahead, their full dynamic, and then they're going to go in, they're going to hit a heavy lunge or a heavy push-up ISO. They have to hit certain benchmarks. So I found that good benchmarks for us at ASP were you should be able to externally load 100% of your body weight for a 30-second lunge. You should be able to have at least 30% of your body weight for a push-up, 30% of your body weight for a groin plank. You should be able to hit these standards before you move on, because everyone that ended up getting to those levels, again, was able to recover really fast. And when it came down to getting relatively stronger in their front and back squat, it was great. They did not have a ton of fatigability. They had really good work capacity. So I kept that on the train, and it's now a staple for everything we do. So we do a pre-fatigue, and that phase will continue until you hit those benchmarks. And then we'll do a post-fatigue, where you'll then do the dynamic exercise, superset with the isometric, where the isometric is no longer the absolute priority, but still a part of the bigger picture. And then they go in phase 3, they go into, again, what we think is best for them. But we always start people off in those first 3 to 6 weeks. You have to hit those benchmarks, and the isometric is the priority, because you can come back day after day after day and you can continue to not have massive discrepancies in your jumps pre-session. They come in with, subjectively through our wellness scoring, soreness is never at a 1 or 2. They're always above 3. So we're not having people that are crushed no matter what we do now. So it's been cool to see. Yeah. So I've just seen, at the end of the day, from what I've learned is, do an isometric, a yielding isometric, and do it for, to failure. And so we went off that Jake to our model. Hey, you're holding this for 30 seconds, then you're going to drop, or for maximum time, as soon as that's not tolerable, drop an inch, drop an inch, drop an inch until the floor is the finale. And you shouldn't be able to stand up from the isometric. So that's what we've been doing now for the better part for an entire year. And again, fast recovery. People are able to, again, when we get into those high levels of relative strength, they can come back day after day without being killed. The super maximal, on the other hand, it's been surprising to see how once they have that isometric base, it's been the yielding isometric base. It's been cool to see that the levels of soreness are not what I would anticipate.
Okay. So, all right, now, wow. Okay, let me unpack this a little bit. So with the, let me take you back. So you say 4 by 30. So you're doing 4 sets, 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Now, question is, with these, when it says these 4 sets, is it that fatigue where you're breaking it down? So they're doing at one level for 30 seconds, they go down for another 30 seconds, down, down, down. So that's essentially 2 minutes?
So they would accumulate, so on the high 5 isos at the start, when we first started introducing these, they would accumulate 2 minutes. So they would go down the 5, A1 to A5, and they would get 30 seconds of each, and then they would ascend the load until they got through that, where they accumulated 2 minutes off of everything. And that's how we went through it. So they would be like, okay, I'm going to start 30 pounds, 10 pounds, 20 pounds here on these exercises. The second set, okay, I'm going to try to increase and then increase. Or they would just stay the same. But it would work up to drop the joint down. We would do one joint angle. If they couldn't hold it, down a little bit, down a little bit, down a little bit until they hit the floor for that 30 seconds. But I would never, my main point with them was, I don't want you coming up from these isometrics. That's a ton of stress, right? We know that we're causing tremendous amounts of, micro contractions across the muscle. We're trying to reduce that tendon creep. We're creating better lineation, if you will, across that tendon. So it's a lot of stress there. Just drop on the floor. Just relax onto the floor gently, and then let's go into the next exercise. And yeah, within 3 weeks, even for we had a 13-year-old hockey team in the spring, or in the fall, sorry. And in their first 3 weeks, we had 5 kids barbell loaded on their back, do their body weight isometrically, yielding iso lunge, 100% of their body weight, 185 pounds for one kid, be able to do that, knee an inch off the floor, and just drop it onto the pins after. Let's reset it, take a minute, boom, 30-second iso. And that was 3 weeks of training 1 day a week, right? So we see these kids hit these metrics, hit these benchmarks in 3 weeks, sometimes even less. Sometimes these kids have a strong base and they get 100% of their body weight by the 6th, 7th session.
So what if now, if you have a kid, if they can hold it for 30 seconds, that means it's too light then, right? If they can hold it at one joint angle. So essentially they should be riding down that all the way down to the knee at like, so for example, if we were to break it down into, I don't know, 6-second increments, or for example, they should be able to go 6 seconds at one. Okay, this is really hard. Let me move down a bit. Down, 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 kind of like that.
Yeah, it depends. Like most of the kids, they're going to just look at the clock and they're going to focus on 30 seconds. So for them, it's, hey, stick this position and you hold it and just drop your knee when you're done. And so if they did it, sometimes in the programs, we can offer 1 or 2 different things. Our younger populations, our 12, 13-year-old kids, they start off and I say, do a load that you can hit for 30 seconds, but leave 5 seconds in the tank. So I'm going to hold 25s in my hand when I'm first learning isometrics. I'm going to do a lunge with 25s in my hands. And at the end of it, okay, you know what? I did 30 seconds. I probably could have done 35. Perfect. Let's start to gauge where that difficulty lies. Like, oh, could you have done another 5 seconds or left 10 seconds in the tank? So we use like an RPE base with the yielding isometrics.
Oh, that's really cool, man. And then question. So you're seeing these kids, what? You said that one hockey group was one time a week. So, but on average, would you say 2 times, 3 times?
But on average, yeah, like 2, 3 days a week. Again, within our 4-day-a-week pops, like a couple of the kids in 4 days a week, they're hitting that benchmark. Like we had a kid that just hit the benchmark like right in the start of week 2. You know what I mean? A pitcher hit his lunge benchmark right away, limited training age, but raw, physically strong, 16-year-old kid, right? Like it's again, in my opinion, it's the motor learning perspective. They are doing something repeatable with frequency and holding one position. So there's a lot of recoverability because it's routinized and they're doing it every day. They have that same isodynamic session every single day that they're in. They become used to it. They have frequency. They learn the skill. They recover faster because of that. And it's only one joint angle. And then we do the dynamic exercise right after. And so, again, these kids, it's because it's so easy. There's less thought, so they can get stronger. Whereas there's no repetition without repetition ecologically, where they're doing 5 reps of squats and have to think about their positions. It's we're going to hold a lunge, and I'm going to get you so strong in that position. Then you're going to go into a dynamic exercise, right? And then in phase 2, that dynamic exercise is going to be the bread and butter, where the ISO is just going to be there, like the offhand in a basketball shot. It's just there to support, but now you have that strength at length.
Man, this is like, this is some good stuff, man. Like, I'm definitely gonna steal this and use it with my sleep. I do like that. So continue on with these isometrics now. You gotta send me videos of these so I can post these as well. So I'm just trying to think with the push-up now, they're just putting load on their back?
Yeah, right on there. So right below the shoulder blades, and they hold an inch off the floor.
Okay. And then question now, you're working with youth population. Do you not find, can the core strength not be a limiting factor for this?
Initially, when they do it body weight, so we go through a different progression. So they'll either do a band across the rack, and they'll go on the band if they really can't hold a push-up. So we'll start at like black band, then green, then like our black bands are what the traditional green bands are. So thick band, and we go down until they can hold a push-up. And now we've got kids, Chris, it's crazy. We have a girl right now, 12 years old, that's like, we do only hand release push-ups in the gym. I don't really do actual push-ups. We go hand release from the bottom. And we've got a girl right now doing push-ups with 55 pounds on her back, 12 years old. Like the strength and them having, it's crazy. Yeah. Oh, we have a number of kids that can, like, we have about a dozen 12-year-olds right now, if not more, 12, 13-year-olds that can do push-ups with 45-pound plus on their back with their feet elevated, like all hand release, but have the core strength, have a straight line, ear to heel. And it's because I don't, like, the adaptation is by how you load it and not by what exercise you pick. So we have kids that have been doing hand release push-ups for a year, and we haven't done dumbbell bench or anything else. So they're really, really strong at that exercise now. And we have our 20-year-old hockey players coming in. They see a 12-year-old doing hand release push-ups with 55 pounds on her back. It's crazy. We've got a kid that's 80 pounds that can goblet squat 100 pounds for 10 reps. It's because they do the same thing and they master the basics, and we do tons of isometrics, and they now have that core stability. It's all better on that side because we don't deviate. We keep it extremely simple. We just rotate around how we do it.
So question, can you just explain the hand release push-ups? Because there's people that are not going to be able to see this. So just can you explain that?
Yeah, so they'll come down to the floor. And I love the hand release push-up because I find that there's far better health for the shoulders in the hand release push-up, and you get better scapular glide across. So they'll go down to the bottom of the push-up, they'll release their hands overhead, so they'll almost just reach in front of them, then they'll come back down. And so when their hand meets the floor, they push and they come through and create that protraction. So we're getting that reach. The weight is never on their shoulder blades. I would like full scapular movement across that push-up, and it works well. We don't have, the forward head carriage on these kids doing push-ups. It's, we eliminate all of that, and you can't really cheat the hand release. Many people think that it's easier. I beg to differ in many ways, because yeah, I guess you can cheat a hand release push-up, but every rep is full range. So, we have kids, we go up, we hand release, we push, and then we go through. So we'll even do little miniature isos before we get into it. And again, every rep that they go through, we're going upward rotation of the scap. We're getting far better movement through the scaps, less anterior glide, and it works a lot better for the kids, and they feel stronger, right? Initially, it's a really good beginner movement, but outside of that, like, they just get stronger every time. So that's kind of how the hand release push-up works. So I have, even for our elite populations, everyone does hand release push-ups. I learned that from Zach DeCant at TCU baseball. His book Movement Over Maxes goes over the hand release push-up, and since I read that last year, it's just been a staple. I love it.
That's really cool, man. Well, honestly, man, thanks for catching up. We're definitely gonna do this again.
Of course, Chris, 100%.
A lot of information that you can, pass along to myself, and I definitely learn a lot every time we talk. I'm definitely going to, those isometrics, consider those stolen. Yeah,
they're great, man. They're awesome.
Then in terms of, I'll have more conversation with you, like with the pre-fatigue, post-fatigue, and like how you go through it. But again, thanks for chatting with me. And yeah, man, we'll talk soon.
Oh, 100%.